And now that you have told your story with your map, we have to create a layout to add other map elements such as the legend and scale bars and maybe other elements. To make a good layout like this one over here requires a bit of passion, a bit of patience, and of course knowing where all the controls are. So let's have a deeper look. Now let's make a proper map of our population density. I have here my map, population density, and I have already loaded a number of additional layers in here, and I have also symbolized the layer in the way that I wanted. I still want to make a few changes to my quanta layer in terms of colors. Maybe we want to choose a different color, and also what is displayed within the legend. I right-click, go to symbology, and let's start with a color scheme first. And of course now we want to map the distribution of population density, and maybe there is a standard color. So we could actually go quickly to the internet, and we would learn that some use reddish tint, others use greenish tint, others use a brown tint or blue. And so we can see that there is really no standard in that. So you can choose whatever colors fit your current map. Let's have a quick look here. When we scroll through the options, you see there are a number of color ramps with clearly distinguishable colors that are also 5 classes. So that really works well for us here. And we can play around with different colors. We could choose a blue and greens. We can choose red, and that may work with the highest values, red being the highest densities, of course. And here is one that I think I may want to choose. This is a color ramp that goes from yellow to blue, and it's very clear where the highest densities are and where the lower densities are. For me, this kind of map works, and so let's choose this one. And the other option we have to do is we have to really control what's in our label. And we can go up here in our symbology tab. If we scroll over to the right side, we can see here are advanced symbol options. And within here, I can format my labels. First of all, you can control here how many decimal places you want, or how many significant digits you want. You can use either of the two. And here is something interesting that this has to do with the alignment. So if I choose, for instance, a right alignment, now we only have the highest number, so lower than 714, lower equal than 1640, etc., etc. Much easier legend to read and understand. And in this case here, I want to play around with how many spaces I leave in between. And we can now choose maybe 5 would be appropriate. I'm still not done. For some reason 714 isn't perfectly aligned here, so I can fix this going back to my primary symbols, and here in my labels I click on my label and I simply add 1 space in here. And in addition to this, I want to add my percentages. So here now we have a legend that contains both information of the actual class boundaries and really what they mean for our quantiles. In this case, of course, we're calling this quintiles because we have 5 classes. Quartiles would be for 4 classes, quintiles are for 5 classes. Now that we are happy with our actual map, it's time to open a layout. To add a new layout, I go to Insert, New Layout, and now instantly I have to choose the size, and in my case I want to make a map for a report, so I use letter size. I give my layout a name. Maybe I want to make several maps, so here's my first one. You could have as many layouts in here as you wanted. Now let's add our data frame. So once we have a layout in here, you see here is my map frame. We have the north arrows. We have other map elements in here that we can add later. But before we add a map frame, you see that the cursor right now is a dark black arrow with a sign there that is for selection. And I want to be able to pan around, so I hit the navigate button, and now I have a handle, which means I can use my paper around. I want to be able to do that because I want to zoom in a little bit here so that I can place my data frame into the right place. So let's add the map frame. I find my population density, and we just edit it. And now I have to choose my data frame. Usual reports have a margin of 1.5 inches. So I can find that by using the ruler. And I make it an inch away from the right border. And then I drag open a rectangle that hopefully fits my study area. So there's my map. And now within the map, see when I'm now using my mouse to zoom in and out, I'm zooming in and out of the paper, not out of my legend or not out of my map within my data frame. If you right click and hit activate, now you're activating the data frame, and now I can zoom in, I can pan around, I can choose a layout that I think works well. Maybe zoom in a little bit more. Let's try a nice round number. And I think that works great. We can always adjust this later again in detail. And now we have to get out of this activation mode. Here is our activated data frame here. I click on this and I close my activation. So just to show you the 3 ways to navigate. Right now I'm in select mode. That means I can select and move map elements around the page. If I go to navigate, my cursor becomes a handle and the whole page is being moved around. That's useful when you want to look at different parts within the page after maybe you zoomed in. And a third way is by right-clicking within an element, and then you can activate that element. And then in this case with the data frame, now we can move within the data frame and make final adjustments. When we added the map frame, it copied the original map that we have here, exactly how it was, into the map frame. So here we have full control inside the map frame of all our different layers. And you can see here are many layers. You can now, for instance, make a full map, and instead of quantile, you choose the equal interval or the natural breaks, and you can easily change your maps with the same layout. So that makes it really very useful and powerful. Let me also show you that there is a link here. Let's just change the symbology for education for argument's sake. I make it a large circle, and you can see now that the same symbology has applied here as well. So there is a clear link between the map and my layout that I have here. So now let's go back to what we had before. Have my quantile map on. Now let's add the legend. We insert the legend. Before I do this, I want to move my map, And another way of moving the map, while you are in edit mode in the layout, you hit the C button, and now your mouse cursor becomes a handle and we can now move within the page. And I add my legend and drag open a rectangle, and the layout understands the borders of existing map elements, so they're nicely aligned. Right now I just make a rough box for my legend, and all the elements that are turned on are now inside my legend. I can turn off the map frame, and I can here now in my drawing order, I can look at all the elements that are available for the legend. Of course, the bottom ones here, I just tick them off right now because we're not interested in those. Now, the first thing you have to consider when you're looking at a legend is, what is your story? The story is population density here. So that must be my top element. And you can control the order how the different map layers are displayed in the legend by controlling them right here. Quantile should go first, hold down my mouse, drag it on top. Then I would like to have hydrology followed by green space, and I want education last. So in this case here, the reasoning for my reordering is the story is about the population density. That's number one. Then followed by polygons, then followed by lines, then followed by points. This is not a rigid order between these three, but you want to keep the polygon and line and point elements always together. You don't want to mix them up. Now that we have the order right, we have to go to each of these and make individual changes until we're happy with the final result. I want to start by showing you how to control, for instance, the font for all elements at once. And I can do that by choosing the legend. That means now the whole legend, everything inside the legend. And if I go here on top to my Format button, I can now change, for instance, the font. Let's choose Calibri for argument's sake. And all the font has been changed right now to Calibri. Of course, the same thing for font and all the other ones. So I like Tomaha, so that works for me. So in this case, I can accept them. I may change the font size a little later, but for now, let's stick with Tomaha, and I can go back to my original quantile elements. You change the elements of any of these layers by right-clicking, like just in most other software, right-click Properties. And here we have a long list of options. We can control what we can actually see on our legend. We don't have any group layer names, so they were never visible. Layer name, we can turn this off. We don't want it. I will deal with this heading here a little later. The other thing we can control is, for instance, patch size. So I can make it quite wide, or let me go back. I can make it square, if you prefer this. But for now, I'm okay with the legend for the quantile layer. Let's move on to hydrology. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to change the name, and we can't do that here in the legend, but we can do that down here in our map frame. So just as if you were in your map, you can go in here, you click, and you can edit your hydrology. And while we add this, let's also change green space. And now we can change the patch of our symbol by right-clicking on symbology and changing the patch. And I like this one here. It's actually called water body. Perfect. And I can also change the patch size for my green space at the same time to natural area. Very fitting. And now we have a much easier to read legend already. Let's move on to our streets. Right click, group name off, layer name off, and here my feature description. Again, that is part of my map frame. And I can rename this as well, just for the map here, and we'll call it streets. The rest is fine right now with our street layer, and educational, we want to rename this to schools. And now let's look how we can change this heading here. This heading is a bit of a challenge because we have a square kilometer in here. How can we add the superscript for the 2 and make this a proper name? Let me show you how. So we go to our layer, we go to our header, and I call it now. And in order to make the 2 a superscript, I can add a special code in here, SUP for superscript, before and after, except here I add a /. And now, if I hit enter, you can see that we have here a superscript. This is now the proper way of the spelling. I just want to change here my SUP to SUB for subscript to show you that we have a whole bunch of different options. I say enter. Of course, we don't want to spell square kilometer, but if you want to have something else with an index number here, that could work. Let's go back. So where did I learn how to do this? Well, you can just go to the internet, add, let's see if this text forming tags looks all right. And if I scroll down here, through somewhere in the middle, here we have now a table that tells us about the various controls that you have. Text color, bold, italic, underline, all caps, etc., etc. So here was our superscript, here was our subscript, and so this is how you can learn what you can do and what the syntax would look like. Now this part of the legend starts to look almost perfect. There's one last thing I would like to do, and that is change the distance between the various elements in here. And I go to my legend, under legend arrangement options, and under spacing. So this is now a little bit hard to find. And here now you can control any kind of distance that you have in here. These are again the default values. If you don't know what something is, well, just make it a big number and look at what the impact is, and then you undo it. So now I increase the distance between the items, so they're slightly larger distance than the items in between. That separates the different elements, makes the legend overall easier to read, and with that we can move on to other map elements. Now let's make some space for the next map element, so maybe we can move the legend to the left side and add, insert, a scale bar. There are many different scale bars available. We have here on top those ones that use metric numbers, and here we have one that use imperial numbers, miles, inches, feet, etc. So of course we want to use metric in Canada, and here are all the different styles. I would like to apply one that is pretty basic and simple, this one here. And I choose a location for it. Right now it can overlap, I don't care. And here is again the default setting for my scale bar. Right click, properties. Or I right click here and properties. Map units are in kilometers. Here is one thing you have to change, the label text. And this is US spelling of kilometers. Of course, in Canada, we have a different spelling for meter and for kilometer. The position is I prefer to put the kilometers underneath to give me more space, and so I choose below and center. Yeah, that's starting to come back together. One thing you can control is how many divisions you have and what of those divisions are visible. You can control everything. So here I have 4 divisions, 1, 2, 3, 4 major divisions, and then I have subdivisions only of the first one. I don't want that many subdivisions. Actually, I don't want any subdivisions, 0. But right now we still have here a text in there that's we don't want, and we can control this as well by going to the scale bar properties here. Where right on top under numbers, divisions and first midpoint here, the half, that is my first midpoint. I don't want this one. I only want to have my divisions. And now you can control this way with many other options how your legend looks like. That is an easy and simple to understand scale bar. Do we need really this many divisions? Well, we can try to resize the scale bar. But now we see we have a small problem. There's a setting that helps us to resize the scale bar in a more intelligent way. Let's undo this. Right-click Properties. And within my major options, I have a Division Resize Behavior option. And if you hover your mouse over here, you can see all the options that are available. You read them through, and in our case, I want to preserve my values when I resize. And you see now here, I can add divisions or the labels automatically depending on where it is. So that is a nice option. I only want these 3. And now actually I want to move it over a little bit so that the edge here lines up. And now it doesn't look as crowded, and I can work with this. Oh, and it just occurs to me that we never fixed here this floating label here. There we don't see a subdivision. That doesn't look very pretty. Let's quickly fix this up. Again, we go to Properties. And within my scale bar properties, right here under frequency, frequency now of our numbers is right now divisions at first midpoint. Let's change this to divisions and first. And with that change, we are done with our map. We can look at the whole map by going here to the full extent, and that's it. You have space here to maybe add a text box of some explanation or data sources and an explanation of what you have done in detail. Another thing that is always worthwhile to do is, in this case here, we used a quantile classification. That is information that I would add here as a text. So let's quickly add that information.
We add our text by hitting Insert. We choose a text symbol. I would like just a regular paragraph. I add text. I just want a rectangle. I add my rectangle in here. We can zoom in and I start writing my text. After this, we want to make sure we format our text, that we have consistent font. We can do this in text format. I want to use my Tomaha as we have for the rest. The size 10, I think that looks great. We can use that. And then with that, here's our text box. And now we can arrange it and place it where we want it. And of course, you can decide what you want inside the text box. Sometimes it's worthwhile to have the date of the map itself, or the maker of the map, so yourself, maybe an email address, so that you can be contacted about people who have questions about your map. In this case here, this map was supposed to be for a report, so I consider this to be done. The last question, of course, is title. Well, where should the title go? Well, if it's a report, we don't have a title. We put our information, our figure title, in a figure caption. And so if this map was in here, there would be space for a figure 7b, and then the title of the map and other information. This information could potentially also go into the caption, but it's also nice to have it in a map. So there's a bit of flexibility there. And now we are done with our layout. And you wonder, what about north arrows? We don't need a north arrow. North arrows are overrated. You only need a north arrow if north is not up. In our case, north is up. It's a convention in cartography, and as long as north is up and you have a large scale map such as Lethbridge, you do not need a north arrow. And finally, to export your layout, to convert this into a graphics format, you need to go to Share, Export, Layout. You choose your format, if it's JPEG or PDF or other formats, and you can choose your resolution that you want on the paper, dots per inch, very important, and you would hit the export button, and that's how easy that is. That's all for now. See you next time.